Welcome in, everybody. I'm with Father Courtney Krier, who is the longtime pastor since 1997. You've been solo here down at St. Joseph's in Las Vegas and came here in 1993. And this will inaugurate a series here as we get to know Father Krier and also the depth of his knowledge and education and relate that to our world today, especially as it concerns Christianity and particularly Catholicism today. Father, welcome to YouTube once again. You're starting to be a regular.
I appreciate that.
One here, so it's always an honor to speak to Father Krier. But today, Father, I thought it might be good if we go back and talk about your particular background, where you were raised, and I think the point of real interest is the calling that people get to the priesthood, and especially in your particular case. A bit about your background, where you were born and raised, where you when you felt like you first had the calling, and a little bit about your seminary, and maybe your first experience as a priest. So why don't we start with where you were born and raised?
Well, where I was born was actually in Columbus, Ohio, in what we call Upper Arlington. But of course, I don't remember much. It was booming time, actually. I think even for the United States, 1960, there was a space age. You know, you're trying to, again, have that of sending the satellites up into space and who was going to be the first one on the moon. And so, of course, my grandfather again had worked for that of the engineering and for that of harvesting for that. And California was one of those places that had both the aspect of a booming economy, a booming population growth, and also being the fruit basket for most of the United States. And of course, he was then taken out there by FMC, at that time Food Machinery Company. Scott Viner had just been bought, and of course with that of coming out, he again saw that there was a need and had my father come out and join him in regards to that of developing and making machines to do the harvesting for that was there. That, of course, we know that a lot of harvesting, and I saw it myself, was done by hand. And you can imagine going hand, being out there in the hot field, pulling carrots out of the hard ground. And of course, these machines would go through and you would see truckloads after truckloads of just carrots being hauled out, or red beets or sugar beets, or basically pretty much all of the root crops that were there. And of course, my grandfather and my father at that time in the very beginning had a lot to deal with that. And so, of course, that's going out to the Central Valley in California where the shop was, and then that was continued. Therefore, I went to school in that of the small town or in the country, in what's
near
called
Modesto.
Near Modesto, north of Modesto, a town called Salida. Of course, you'd pronounce it Salida in Spanish, but of course, we all call it Salida.
We talk to people, they don't know where it is. You always have to tell them if you blink.
Yes, but it's there. It's actually, this area is known, and we know because we have the grapes and everything else, but also the gallows for Gallo Winery. So if we have all that, then you can see that's where we were. Horses, the country. That's most of my age until I was a young teenager. But it was interrupted, and I'll put this away in regards to what we want to talk about, and that is my calling, and that was there.
Before you get into your calling, you want to hit that one last thing before we get into your calling. What was it like growing up in the northern part of the Central Valley? What was that like?
Actually, it was nice for me to a certain extent. I think we were separated from, and I know that because having to go and take a few trips, we were separated, I think, at that of most of what was happening in the world. I think there was quite a lot of innocence there. I know there was the movie put out at that time, and that was American Graffiti, if I recall right. But, you know, for ourselves, I think for the most part, at least where we were out in the country, it was a time of of innocence, but it was a time of seeing growth. We were surrounded by the fields, riding the horses.
Well, hobbies or things like that? Were you a motorhead? A lot of people in Modesto would cruise McHenry Avenue.
Yeah, they were, but we were out in the country. Our means of transportation was the bicycle and the horses.
Okay.
So, and then that was there, and so we weren't. Of course, that's not. I can't say we didn't work with that because, of course, in the shop we always had the 65 and 64 and the 67 Mustangs coming in and the Camaros and working on those and working with those who again
use the shop. Get to it, yeah.
We'd come into the shop and work on their vehicles, and so definitely I had that experience. There's also then in the shop at that time, learning from the very beginning to run starting from the drill press and to that of the welding and all the different things that were there, learning how to do the drafting for the machinery and those things were all part of growing up in that environment.
Were you interested in that as a career potential? Did your father or your expect
yes.
you to go into the...
I don't know if he necessarily expected me to. I think because you still have that of the firstborn. And I think people forget that basically the aspect was no matter what, the firstborn was always expected to take over. And so I think that I was there. I had more of an interest perhaps than my brother did, but I also early on, and I think I've somewhat expressed it already, that I was already thinking about the priesthood and other things. Actually, not so much expressing the priesthood, I was actually expressing that of being a nuclear physicist. And that's what I was headed towards in regards to the studies that I wanted, because that was what we were living in, that of the astrophysicists and that of nuclear age and that of, again, science exploration.
So were you good in mathematics?
Yeah, we were. I was good. I was there also until, of course, they introduced and started introducing that of experimental, I would say, making us guinea pigs and trying new ways of learning math. Because when it comes to that of 1 + 1 = 2, it's very simple. When you again can calculate and you again can come up with those answers, but when they start trying to play those tricks, I remember basically when I was at the end in 7th, 8th grade, there was only one person who again was actually excelling in this new math, and that person wanted to be a magician.
Well, so you could have potentially been a rocket scientist then, right?
And sometimes, that's why God puts these things in your path. Because...
So let's talk about the calling then, Father, and this is, I think, what really people are calling or watching this video to see, especially today when so many young people may be contemplating, what does it mean to have a calling, and how does that manifest itself in the reality of your everyday life, and how do you tell people about it? I have a calling, because sometimes I've heard some people, oh no, we were expecting you to take over the, following the dad's footsteps and things and be a rocket scientist, but how does that calling get a hold of you, and how did it first manifest itself with you, and how did you deal with it and come to accept that and understand this is what my life is?
Well, and that's there, and it's kind of somewhat going back and forth, but the aspect was it first came because for us as Catholics, that we normally receive Holy Communion about the age of 7. And of course, at my time, we still actually had nuns that actually wore habits. And the nuns, again, teaching us the catechism. We were out, as we again said, out in the countryside. They had to come from the city. Again, they had that of after school. They would announce that the Catholic children were to go to the catechism class on Friday after school at a certain time. And actually, we sometimes were excused early to go to that catechism class. And of course, in preparing for that, and here working at 2nd grade, when preparing for First Communion, that was, again, one of the things the sister that was teaching said was, when we receive First Holy Communion, we are to ask our Lord, what does He want of you in your life? And, you're 7 years old, but of course, we had that aspect that the sisters are the sisters, and they are the brides of Christ, and as such, again, they have that relationship, and if they ask us to do that, then there must be a reason. So, of course, that's what I asked when I received Holy Communion, was that very question, and it said, you're to be a priest.
Wow.
And it just came like that. And even though you can imagine from 7 years until, on through school and with all the different things happening, you can imagine that it's something that just never left the back of my mind.
Even through the turmoil, because I remember, just as a segue, School Sisters of Notre Dame. I came into school one day and the sisters in her habit and still cracking her knuckles with the ruler, and the next day she's in street clothes and spinning Jesus Christ Superstar records, and I'm like, what the heck happened?
And we saw that, and definitely you have that aspect, but you had, and it's still there, because I was still able to see good priests and bad priests. That is, so to say, priests who again were still trying to follow that line of holiness, as also again those who were out there for that of freedom and liberation, and out there trying to create a new theology.
Vatican II social, let's turn outward and save the poor.
And obviously it had an impact, because I didn't receive confirmation at that time. The other thing is because you're right, everything changed. The ones that were teaching, all of a sudden they were new. They weren't the same ones that when I made my first communion, they were new. And it was all, going to catechism was all fun and games. And that aspect was, I'm somebody who's serious. And because I'm somebody who's serious, it's like, why do I want to go to this fun and games, not learning anything, when here it is, I'm someone who devours books and again has that of the potential, not of what I want to say anything about myself, but that of potential wanting to be someone who was an astrophysicist, and that means that definitely there's a lot there. There's that also that social life that is there, because of course our group that was there with being in the 4-H club, and being also in sports, because definitely we're going to be in sports, that of basketball, that of football. There wasn't for me that idea of saying I want to take time out for something that wasn't beneficial. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if the ones responsible at that time understood that, but I think it happened because I think most of my fellow Catholics, there was only about 6 or 7 of us there in my grade, of about 60 students who are Catholics. I think most of us, again, didn't go to the classes anymore. I think they had the same feeling, because we used to, from supporting and encouraging one another to be present, it just seemed like we all just fell away.
Well, let's talk about when your calling deepened, Father, because when we're young, we think, like, I thought I'd be a baseball player or this or that, and then reality hits. Well, you're 5 feet, you don't really have you're not going to be a baseball player. But how did you confirm in or really dial in that, I know you had the first communion experience, but did that stay strong with you as an undercurrent? Because I think you went to seminary early, didn't you? Weren't you rather young?
Yes.
You went to
well, that's what we want to look at, and that would be, again, having graduated from 8th grade, then the question is next is, where am I going to go to high school? And so that aspect was I was going to go to the local Catholic high school, but there was that question, and that is, it was there, and that was, even though, and I thought it was possible that it could be both, and I think it would have been in normal circumstances, an astrophysicist, because we know that when it comes to the church, if you were to go back, and even today there's a few, but if you were to go back, most of those who were in that of the sciences were priests. I mean, Gregory Mendel, again, was that of, for genetics, was a Catholic priest, and you can go on and on.
There was a Belgian priest that came up with the Big Bang.
Yes. And so it's not something that would have been contradictory, but like I said, right before, with that of the math and being unfortunately lost in regards to how to address this new way of how we're supposed to do math, and then that being an experiment, that we weren't given that solid algebra, that solid geometry, which we should have had at that time, that set me back. So there was those things that were there, but even before that time, so to say, of recognizing a lot of that, was the question, where am I going to go to high school? And that was, again, to go to the local Catholic high school. But going there again had to be that answer. Okay, if I'm going to high school, if I'm going to choose this high school, why and what am I going to learn, and what do I want to learn? And therefore, that was going to be that I wanted to be a priest. And of course, we talked to the holy, will be the
local bishop.
No, I'm trying to it was. I think they were Augustinians. Okay, I think they were
an order of monks.
They weren't monks there, but something they were teaching brothers. They weren't Christian brothers. I don't think they were. They could have been of the Holy Cross. I'm not sure, but I thought that more that they had a connection with the Augustinians. So somebody perhaps might know more. I didn't do my research afterwards because I left all that behind. But anyway, so it was agreed that I would have actually, since I was pursuing the priesthood and explained it to the priest that was there, that I would have studies on the side because Latin was thrown out. And you can imagine, even coming there, the aspect is that the idea was that, of course, I don't accept, and they knew to a certain extent that we no longer went to, and it wasn't as it is today, but we no longer went to the Novus Ordo service.
And we'll be talking about that in a future video, by the way. But Father, you stayed strong in your idea that you wanted to be a priest. Well, what about the spiritual side of that? What's any particular markers that came into your mind, like when you would come into a church or you would go to Mass and things like that? Obviously, it must have confirmed your...
And at that time, there wasn't after the changes. Because after the changes...
So you're saying you soured, you started to sour.
I wouldn't say it didn't sour on me.
It wasn't what you...
It was that what this was not what I had been taught when I was young. And when I'd been taught as I was young, and which the sisters told me at that time, and you might think, okay, 6, 7, 8, that aspect is what I was told at that time was the church never changes.
Right.
This is the Mass. You are receiving the body and blood of Christ. And we can only look at that aspect that it seemed to be, and you have to realize that being young, it seemed to be something that was local. And therefore you just figured it was just some people that were there that were just kind of, because we still had a couple priests who were still, as we talked to this priest that I just mentioned in regards to taking Latin, as we again had another priest who died right after I was right before I left again to go to the seminary, who again was also saying the Latin Mass, and so we had some connections with a few of the priests that were still conservative, and we looked at that idea that, and according to them and to some others, that all we were going to do was we were going to continue to fight and to bring back the faith that was there. So I wasn't necessarily soured on that. I think it was probably good because I realized that I would have to put up a fight, a battle for that of the Catholic faith.
So, we're the same age, and we feel like in a lot of ways we got caught in the switches of this sudden about facing, localizing everything we lost the uniform language across every nation of the world of Latin and that common unifying theme. But let's talk about what seminary. So what age were you when you went into seminary?
I was right there. So that was that choice to get in high school. I wanted to be a priest, and then there was someone who came and gave a lecture and said that there was a seminary, a place that again they were still teaching the Catholic faith in its entirety. And so that aspect was, then I asked again my parents' permission to again go to that seminary in order to again
your age
prepare myself.
At that time?
I had just turned 14.
That's amazing.
So
amazing, because your route is so different. And so they agreed that, and that was overseas?
No, it wasn't overseas. Okay. It was actually in northern Idaho at that time. And so I went there and again went through the studies. It was good insofar as, again, to a certain extent, of having a basis of now knowing what the Catholic faith is, because you can understand that, except for my reading, having again, when it comes to that of about 10, 11, realizing that you're coming at this age and you've got to have something to hold on to when you have the world around you, and you again realize that you're supposed to be good, to start turning to the rosary, again starting to read spiritual books, to again have some understanding. When I went there, at least now I learned the faith, because
so you felt like you were back on the track you wanted to
definitely
be called towards. And did you go on to a different place after that, or did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Afterwards, as you know, I ended up finally, and it was years, and I know it's of the difficulties that are there because of the turmoil in the church and trying to find that. I eventually again went to that of Europe, to a seminary there in Munich, Europe, and that of Munich, Germany. That was also because again I wasn't. And I know it's something that's absolutely necessary, is an understanding. There's a difference when you can, again, read the Gettysburg Address and repeat it, but there's a difference between being able to memorize and repeat it as opposed to understanding and saying, wow, this is what it's telling us.
Big difference.
And so that aspect was, I wasn't receiving that. And of course, I was trying to again find a place where I could again have that of hearing and grasping and understanding, something that again would at least bring into my mind that yes, this is, as opposed to it's just a repetition. And I think that's one of the main things that even when we look at what happened during the 60s and what happened previous to the 60s was, unfortunately, instead of most people having a faith in their heart, they only had it on their lips. Instead of having it in their heart, they only had it in their mind. They were able to repeat, but they weren't able to understand.
Like the Gettysburg Address,
yes, like the Gettysburg
analogy that you had there. You were back on track, and it sounds strange to say graduate, but a lot of people don't know it. The priesthood, you finish your studies. I guess you get a diploma from. You spoke German too. Did you?
Well, I had to learn German. Yes, definitely.
Wow. And they were teaching in German.
Yes, German. Yes.
Wow.
So that was there, but
where did you pick up Spanish?
I didn't learn Spanish until I came here to Las Vegas.
Okay. So that should be an inspiration to everybody out there. It says, I'm too old. Not that you're old, but I'm saying that's amazing that you cared enough to you had to learn German to be educated, and then you came here and learned.
And you go through that with the early missionaries. You think of the early missionaries, even the ones who came here to the United States, and they had to learn the languages of the natives that were here, the indigenous people. And you have to realize that when you look at that, there wasn't even a book that you could reference to. You had to again hear and therefore be able to pick up those sounds and be able to again point and then such again have that.
Did you feel like as you went along that did you start to realize that you were going to experience some headwinds with the way that you experienced the church as opposed to the way the church was changing? It was becoming more functional, or like what we're going to do now to worship and things. Did you anticipate that I'm going into I no longer have the tailwind of traditional Catholicism behind me, and I'm probably going to run into my views may start to have a little bit of friction.
Yeah, we were praying, we were hoping, like I said already, in the 60s in regards to that of opposing the changes that were happening, that we could again bring it back. But we already knew there was a battle going on. We were already hearing that aspect that you have to be obedient, you have to accept it. And that aspect is I can't accept a contradiction.
Well, a lot of priests fell away and left the
yes, we know. I remember having and being there where priests were asked to again say Holy Mass, and they would say they had to have the bishop's permission. They would have to have, they can't, because otherwise they again said they wouldn't do it or they would lose their pension. And so definitely we know that all of these experiences are there to, again, for me to recognize that what is my decision? Am I going to, again, be subject to that, of dependent on that of just being a hireling, or am I going to be that of a shepherd? Am I going to, again...
Paul Parrott compared to somebody who's going to preach something of substance that may save a soul or lead souls to heaven. So you graduated. When were you ordained a?
Not until 1992.
Okay.
So I know it's quite a ways away, but that's, like I said, with all the turmoil and everything, going from, like I said, from one seminary, having to go to another one, because of course it wasn't preparing me, and of course not accepting that, because perhaps maybe I had one of those combative spirits. I wouldn't necessarily say that, because I think I was very, so to say, contributive. I think that, you know, for what I've put into the places, the seminaries, whenever I've given, I've contributed more than I've received. Not to say anything, but rather, again, that reality and accepting it. And so, but I think they realize that I'm still saying, where is the beef? Where is the faith? Where is that of the answers to the questions today? And as such, again, like I said, I didn't start hearing that until I again went to a seminary in that of Munich, Germany, and there again I started hearing answers to that of how to again address the situation. And it wasn't just putting the blame on people, because that's an easy way, the scapegoat. You know, the problems today are because of somebody there or somebody there. The aspect is it's actually within ourselves, and we have to understand it's within ourselves and our comprehension of reality, which again is going to say, okay, this is what's here. How again am I going to address it? And therefore being able to address it is something I think we all need to again look at, especially those of us who are supposed to be again giving the faith to others. Because if we don't have the faith, truly have the faith, we can't give it to others. Because if they want to read the catechism, they can read the catechism. They don't need me to read it to them.
Well, you know what? We're going to leave you on tenterhooks now for the next exciting installment of the series, when Father Krier actually is now an ordained priest and comes to Las Vegas. I guess that was your first assignment. We're not going to let the cat out of the bag, and I'm going to ask you about what that experience was like compared to what you thought it would be, and in terms of shaping faith the way that you believed it should be shaped and delivered to people.
I don't want to say.
I don't want to get in, not shaped, but conforming to what the doctrines, the traditional doctrines of the church.
What has been that of the faith of the church all through the centuries.
So we're going to leave you now with that, and I want to thank Father Krier as usual for taking time out of Father Krier is a one-man band in every sense of the word down here, so I'm always appreciative of Father Krier's time. Thank you, Father.
Oh, you're welcome.
And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, hit the like button and the bell for all notifications, because this is going to be, I think, a very informative and hopefully uplifting series of videos to relate faith today, Christianity, to the, obviously we're in a world with a lot of challenges and a lot of selfishness and a lot of conflicting ideologies. So I think it becomes even more imperative that we navigate that successfully. So thank you very much for watching.
Thank you very much too also. Hopefully again, it's been something that's there to assist you and inspire you, and to again look at that of the Catholic faith, and therefore also then have an understanding of that faith. So which is so important, because again, when we look at ourselves, we have to believe in something.
Okay, would you like to end with a blessing, Father, for our viewers here?
Benedictus omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descend super vos et manet semper. Amen.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome.